Good day, Deep Inward family. Welcome to day 304 of our Bible study review. Today we're closing out the Gospel according to Mark with chapters 13 through 16. Let's remember where we left off yesterday. They were in the temple, Messiah and his disciples, and they witnessed this widow giving everything that she had. And so as we're opening up chapter 13, this is how it starts. It says, as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Teacher, see what great stones and what great buildings are here." Yeshua answered him and said, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone shall be left upon another that shall not be thrown down." Now that did not happen immediately, but it is recorded in 70 AD. All of those stones were turned over. The Messiah does not want them to be impressed with buildings. Our Messiah wants them to understand that what he's building back up is man. All right. So the second temple has to come down because people are trusting in a building and they're not trusting in him, just like ancient Israelites did in the past with the first temple, right? Solomon's temple was glorious and people had a false trust in the temple. They did whatever they wanted to do, but then they came into the house of Yah and still sacrificed things that were not pleasing unto him. Our Messiah wants us to see that the thing he wants to make over is us, right? We are his body. We are the temple of Yah. Eventually, this is what he wants them to see. But as you continue reading in chapter 13, you will see that it models day 299 in Matthew chapter 24. He tells the disciples about the coming persecutions. He also tells them about, looking out the signs for, Daniel, when Daniel talks about the abomination of desolation, i.e., the signs of the great tribulation. And then he tells them about the coming of the Son of Man. You will see that this almost models exactly how Matthew 24 is spoken of. The accounts are very similar. And as we know, that's what the gospel accounts are. Let everything in the earth be established by 2 or more witnesses. Well, that's what's going on here. Our Messiah tells of the parable of the fig tree again, and he says, "Look, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away." And the Messiah speaks about the unknown day and hour of his coming. Again, if you want to go back and refresh your memory, you won't have to go back too far. It is day 299, and it will be in Matthew chapter 24. And now we open up chapter 14. It says, "Now the feast of the Passover and unleavened bread were 2 days away, and the chief priests and the scribes looked for a way to seize him and secretly kill him. But they said, not on a feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people." And then it goes into the fact that they go into Bethany. And do you remember the woman who takes this very expensive oil and she anoints the head of our Messiah? Now the disciples gripe and they're like, this is a waste. This could have been sold to, feed the poor and take care of the poor. And the Messiah, he stops them and he tells them, "What she has done for me is very important. She has anointed me for my burial." Picking up in verse 10, it says, "Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray him to them. When they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him his silver. So he looked for how he might conveniently betray him." Now we're going to review the time when the Messiah is actually going to celebrate the Feast of Passover with the disciples. So let's pick up in verse 12. It says, "On the first day of unleavened bread, when they sacrificed the Pesach," right, the Passover lamb, "his disciples said to him, 'Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?' So he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, 'Go into the city, and a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you there.' He says, 'Follow him. Wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, the teacher says, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a larger upper room, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there.'" Verse 16, "His disciples went out and came into the city and found it as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. In the evening he came with the 12. As they sat and ate, Yeshua said, 'Truly I say to you, one of you who is eating with me will betray me.' They began to be sorrowful and to say to him one by one, 'Is it I?' And another, 'Is it I?' And he answered them, It is the one of the 12, one who is dipping the bread in the dish with me. The Son of Man indeed goes, as it is written concerning him. But woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had never been born. And so Messiah keeps the Passover with the disciples, and he tells them, take the bread. This is my body. Eat of it. So they take the bread and they pass it. They break it and they pass it. And they do the same with the cup, right? And he says, this is the blood of my covenant. And then he tells them, I will not drink again of this until I drink it anew with you in my kingdom. We know by now, as we should, that this represents tabernacles when he comes the second time and sets up the millennial reign here upon the earth. It's the wedding supper of the Lamb. Just like in the account of Matthew, they sung a hymn and they went up to the Mount of Olives. And it is at this time that the Messiah tells them that they will be scattered that very night. Our Messiah quotes the prophets that speak on behalf of this very night. And he says, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go before you in Galilee. But then we see the account of Peter, how he says, no matter what, I will not deny you. And then the Messiah says, before the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times. Verse 31, we know the zeal, and we know what Peter says. He says, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. They all said the same thing. And then he goes into prayer in Gethsemane. And this is the time where he's asking the disciples to keep watch, right? And they get weak and they fall asleep. And he prays 3 times for the Father to possibly take this cup of suffering away from him. But we know that he says, it is not my will, but your will be done. And so I'm just reviewing what has already been recorded in the gospel account according to Matthew, aka Levi, because we know that Judas comes. He comes and he portrays the Messiah, and he brings a band of people with him. And the Messiah says, look, did y'all not sit with me in the synagogues while I was teaching? Why didn't you take me there? He goes, why do you come with these weapons? Am I truly a threat to you? And so now after this, when Messiah is captured and he's brought before the Sanhedrin, these verses 53 through 65 almost match word for word of Matthew chapter 26, and that review can be found in day 300. It was the whole detail of how the high priest, he tore his robe, therefore disqualifying himself. Remember, I put in some deep study with materials underneath the description box in day 300. If you haven't watched it, please go back and watch it. And now we're going to read the account of how Peter denies the Messiah 3 times. It's a bit more detailed in this account. And so let's pick up in verse 66. It says, while Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, you also were with this Yeshua of Nazareth. But he denied it, saying, I neither know nor understand what you are saying. Then he went out to the porch, and the rooster crowed. So we have the first time that he denied the Messiah. Second time we see in verse 69, the servant girl saw him again and began to say to those who stood by, this man is one of them. But he denied it. A little while later, those who stood by him again said to Peter, surely you are one of them, for you are Galilean, and your speech confirms it. See, they understood his accent was not that of those in Jerusalem. They understood him to be Galilean. Verse 71, Peter began to invoke a curse on himself and swear, I do not know this man of whom you speak. And the rooster crowed a second time. And Peter called to mind the words of Yeshua when he said to him, before the rooster crows twice, you will have denied me 3 times. And when he thought on this, he wept. Now, as we walk into chapter 15, we will see that it's almost exactly the same as Matthew chapter 27, which is also the review of day 300. So it tells of the account when Yeshua was brought before Pilate, and Pilate asked, he goes, are you the king of the Jews? And our Messiah only said a few words to him. He says, you have said so. It goes over the account again of how it was this great celebration before Pilate, and the custom was to release one of the prisoners, but the people did not want to release Yeshua. It says that the Pharisees and the scribes, they stirred up the people to have Yeshua crucified. The soldiers of Pilate, they mock Messiah, they beat him, they scourge him, and then it tells of the crucifixion. It tells again of when the Messiah cried out and he released his spirit. And when he did, we see the same detail of the temple curtain tearing from top to bottom. And we see that none of the disciples were there as our Messiah was suffering. But you know who was? Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James. Also, we see this rich man named Joseph. He asks for the body of Messiah so that he can properly have him buried. Now, in Jewish culture, right, the men were not buried beneath the ground. They were above the ground, right? Our Messiah's body was placed into a tomb and there was a stone rolled over it. Chapter 16. Let's just read through the full thing. It says, when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. Very early in the morning on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb at the rising of the sun. They said among themselves, who will roll the stone away from the door of the tomb for us? But when they looked, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, for it was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white robe, and they were frightened. Verse 6, he said to them, do not be frightened. You are looking for Yeshua of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen, and he is not here. See the place where they laid him, but go your way. Tell the disciples and Peter that he is going before you in Galilee. There you will see him, as he told you. They went out quickly and fled from the tomb, for they trembled and were amazed, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Verse 9. Now when Yeshua rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he cast 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him as they mourned and wept. When they heard that he was alive and he had been seen by her, they did not believe it. Verse 12. After that, he appeared in another form to 2 of them as they walked and went into the country. Do you see that? He appeared to them in a different form, not how they were used to him. All right, and it says, and they went and told it to the rest, but they did not believe them either. You see that? He sent 2 witnesses to them about his rising from the dead, and they would not believe, even though the Messiah told them 3 times that he was going to die and raise from the dead. And then he told them where to meet him after he would raise from the dead. You see what our Messiah has to work with? And he's still working with a lot of hard hearts. But let's pick up in verse 14. Afterwards, he appeared to the 11 as they sat at supper, and he reprimanded them for their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they did not believe those who had seen him after he had risen. He said to them, go into all of the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. These signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will cast out demons. They will speak with new tongues. They will take up serpents. If they drink any deadly thing, it will not hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover. And it says in verse 19, after the Lord had spoken to them, he was received up into heaven and sat at the right hand of Elohim. Then they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word through the accompanying signs. Amen. So you see, the gospel according to Mark, it ends a little bit different than Matthew. It tells of the ascension of our Messiah, and that goes hand in hand with the scriptures concerning the one who would sit at the right hand of the Father. And he says, wait until I make all of your enemies a footstool. Congratulations, Deep in Word family. You have finished 2 gospel accounts that tell of the truth of our risen King, Yeshua HaMashiach. I'll see you tomorrow for the opening of the gospel account of Luke. Until then, Yah bless.